Do you believe that slavery is an ideal system? Do you believe that there should be slaves in a society? Do you think slavery is okay?
Yeah, I mean, slavery is something that I do not find to be immoral. Is there really a fundamental difference between wage labor and slave labor? Is there a difference between owning someone versus renting someone? Renting someone is worse, because think about the difference between owning a car and renting a car. When you rent a car, you drive it, in a very abusive kind of way, as opposed to owning it, where that's your investment, you care about it. Anyway, so that's something that's uncomfortable for people who are raised in the West. The legal concepts underlying slavery exist within the employer-employee contract of wage labor. In many cultures, there's not really a difference between saying that person A, like Ridvan, owns George. Okay, that's a slave relationship. Ridvan owns George. There's not really a difference between that and saying that George has a contractual obligation to Ridvan. Capitalism is really fundamentally no different than slavery.
How can you combine the idea that slavery is okay in Islam with the idea that Islam strives for eventual human happiness, and Islam would still continue slavery in today's time if it wasn't for international human rights laws and forces and laws pushed by the West? It is an undeniable fact that in Islam, a slave is still a slave, and a slave is basically, in Muhammad's own words, still owned by a Muslim and used by a Muslim. This includes labor slaves and slave girls with which a Muslim can have non-consensual sex with, for example. You cannot possibly compare that to a Western system, to a Western capitalist system, for example, in which a person works for years, but can also do with his own life whatever he wants. He can choose a job, choose this job, choose that job, be self-employed, go to a different country and choose a job there, have their own home, have whatever home they want, have whatever rights they want, and be completely equal in front of the law. How can you say that an Islamic society with slaves is more for eventual human happiness than a Western society, for example, where someone can choose where they want to work and can do with their lives whatever they want? That was the entire point of the question.
Like, the whole point that I was making is that there isn't a fundamental difference between the logic of being a wage worker and being a slave. And I cited David Graeber, I can cite other anthropologists and historians.
Okay, we don't need to cite studies in order to see which one is better.
It should be like you and not cite anything. And just
it is ridiculous to cite arguments to find out whether.
And why are you objecting to me citing evidence? Listen to the point.
Because the question is very simple. You don't need to cite an argument to figure out whether you will be happy going to a school or you will be happy living in a basement. You don't need to cite a study to find out if you will be happy in a one-room house or in a five-room house.
Look, I the most ridiculous thing the reality of happiness in the West. The institutionalization from birth.
Very, very simple question. Very simple question.
And it involves slavery by another name.
Very simple question.
Difference between Muslims.
Very simple question. Very simple question. No, you're not answering the question. Very simple question. I have a very simple question. Daniel, I have a very simple question. Do you think a society is happier when numerous people in that society are enslaved and have no control over their own freedom, their travel, their means, their house, and anything at all, and are not equal in front of the law? Or a society in which people work hard, but can eventually choose their own jobs, make their own careers, and go wherever the hell they want? Which society do you think is happier?
I'm saying the distinction that you're making is incoherent.
There's no distinction. It's a simple question. Which society is happier?
The distinction that what you're appealing to as the free society, the utopia that everyone can choose what they want to do, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the West.
It exists everywhere. You're speaking like one of those incoherent movies or like 1984 or like what are those whole books called that were written in the first half of the 20th century? That's how you're speaking. I'm asking a very simple question: which society is better? Which society is happier?
Ridwan, which society is better?
No, not better. I misspoke. Happier.
Where everyone is a billionaire. And
I misspoke. Happier.
Is that society better or a society that doesn't have?
I misspoke. I'm not saying better. I'm saying happier. Which society is happier? Very simple question. You don't need to cite anything for that.
slavery, okay, which society is better, right?
No, happier.
I'm asking you an analogous question because the question is framed in a problematic way. You're using terms without reflecting on the meaning of the terms.
I'm asking you a very simple question. Why don't you just answer the question? Which society is ultimately happier?
A society that doesn't have any hierarchy is what you're appealing to. A society where everyone is equal at the same level. This is the argument from Robert Nozick.
I haven't said that.
Do all societies have hierarchy? Is that inevitable?
They have hierarchies, of course. That wasn't the question.
Is a society with hierarchy better or happier, or a society without hierarchy? Which one's happier?
It depends. That wasn't the question. That's a completely different discussion.
Okay, you can say it depends, but I can't say it depends. Why can't you answer a simple question, Ridwan?
I would say some hierarchies are necessary, which answers the question. But that's not the question.
As well.
That is not the question.
Hierarchy are better as well.
You're playing with words that have no relation to the topic at hand at all. I'm asking you a very simple question, which you have refused to answer.
A word that you're using and that many use in a very unreflective, uneducated way, and I'm trying to bring some nuance and erudition to the concept.
You cannot compare slavery to...
Slavery is a fundamental...
It has nothing to do with defining slavery. I'm asking you a very simple question.
Hierarchy is a fundamental component of every society.
Okay, fine.
The structure of slavery is found in our society and is experienced by the lowest classes of people. That exists, and it's much more dystopian in the current modern world than it was. Slaves in the Muslim world
Daniel,
were much better treated and had a much higher quality of life and were much happier.
I agree that Western nations have a system, have a hierarchy, and I agree that you could possibly define people who work very hard as slaves if you so want to. I am asking the question again. Do you think a society in which slavery, where people are completely dependent on the mercy of their masters and their owners, where they have to do what their owners say and they don't have the freedom to live their life as they wish, that society and a Western society, for example, just for the sake of the example.
That's not the case in Western society. Your question, the way you're framing it is not meaningful.
Okay, forget about Western society. A society where people have to work very hard to make a living, but where they can also freely choose their jobs and move to places, buy their own homes, go up and down in ladders, pursue a different education, choose jobs and homes, and go to and move to different countries. Which society is happier, fundamentally happier?
In Islamic society as well. You're creating a false dichotomy. You're creating
I'm not. I didn't even give an example for that example. I'm just asking you a question. Which example is a better society?
You said the Western. You said Western.
No, I just said I'm not saying the Western. I said it first, but I'm not. I'm saying now. I don't mean the West. I don't mean West. I'm just giving you an example. This society and that society. Which society is happier? Which society will ultimately be happier?
Society that doesn't have. If people's quality of life is increased by what you mentioned, then yes, that's a happier society, but it's something that is fantasy.
Okay, fantastic. So the point has remained unanswered after 20 minutes or 10 minutes. Fantastic.